Saludos a todas las personas.
Greetings to all of those who are here connected on behalf of the Embassy of the United Kingdom of Latin America and the Caribbean. We welcome you to the second day of Connect Agro Series Clean Technology and Smart Agriculture Edition, UK LATAC. The event that connects the agro sector of Latin America and the Caribbean with the United Kingdom through knowledge, innovation, and technology. Today, we are pleased to continue with these presentations where speakers from different parts of the world are sharing their experiences and knowledge about innovation and technology in agro. Before we begin with the agenda of today, we would like to thank all those speakers who yesterday made part of the event, who shared with us their knowledge regarding the transition of the agricultural sector towards a decarbonized future, focusing mainly on the use of technology, innovations, and services that help reduce the environmental impact and the emissions of greenhouse effect gases coming from agriculture. We also would like to thank the attendance of all of those who are possible to this event, our speakers, the participants, our ally entities, Blue Marble Microinsurance, Ciel Center for Innovation, Excellence in Livestock, CHAP, Center of Agricultural Technology of the United Kingdom, the School of Business from the University of the Andes, and Mtc Manufacturing Technology, and of course, the entity that supports us, AgriLink. Today, we will have an academic agenda that will include opportunities of decarbonization, technologies, and innovations that can be implemented during the design and operation of agro-industrial projects and sustainable supply chains aligned to the international commitments to reduce the emission of greenhouse effect gases in the food supply chain. Welcome all once again to Connect Agro Series. To open the second day of Connect Agro Series 2021, we invite Federico Perez, Regional Sectorial Leader in Agricultural Technology based in the British Embassy in Buenos Aires, responsible for assisting British firms to enter and expand their businesses in Latin America and the Caribbean. He is responsible for carrying out actions to achieve better understanding of the commercial policies in the agricultural sector of the countries in the Mercosur bloc, and with prior experience in multilateral negotiations in the Ministry of Agriculture, Livestock, and Fishing of Argentina. Welcome, Federico. Well, thank you very much, Maria Clara. Good morning to everyone in all of Latin America. I'm aware that it's very early in many of the countries that are here with us today, so I can only imagine many of you with a cup of coffee right in front of the screen. Well, beyond my presentation or my introduction from Maria Clara, I would like to reintroduce myself formally. I work in the British Embassy in Buenos Aires as responsible for all the actions that the British government does in Latin America related to the technology, the agricultural technology sector. As you might have noticed, my accent is not British at all. It is an accent that is closer to the Plata River, but I thought that it was preferable for me to make this presentation in Spanish because the majority of the audience are Spanish speakers, so we can give the translators a little bit of a break so that they can catch some air for the rest of the session that will be long, not just today, but also tomorrow. Well, I will share my screen for a brief presentation. I hope that you can see it. Please let me know if there's anything wrong, but it's an honor for me to be able to give the welcoming words for the second day of the event that gathers all of the British embassies, many of the British embassies in Latin America, and with great effort in terms of coordination and organization from the British Embassy in Colombia. I think that these 3 days will be very useful to be able to have a good dimension and a good image of how the technology sector works in agriculture in the UK, and mainly to be able to know which actors it takes on. Yesterday, we heard, for example, representatives of two of the four innovation centers that the UK has in agricultural technologies, such as the CL in livestock and chap and crop protection. We also heard representatives from the universities and representatives from a more commercial point of view of specific companies, some in genetics, veterinary diagnostics, others in robotics. And I think that that gives us a very good feel, and it's very a good paradigm of what the agri-tech sector is in the UK. It takes on both science and the academy and the industry as well. So I think that it's extremely important to be able to have this type of events at a regional level in terms of access for the countries in Latin America. Regarding the topic, well, honestly, I think that it's very much aligned to the debates and the discussions that have been had in the agricultural sector in the last few years, things such as sustainability, environmental impact, decarbonization of the agriculture, and climate change, of course, that with a lot of timing, this event is having place this week, when next week the UK will be the host of the conference of climate change, where all the countries will be gathered. But in this idea of how the concept has grown in terms of sustainability next to agriculture and the environmental impact concept, I wanted to give just two examples, at least personally speaking, that talk about this, how this concept has grown, sustainability together with agriculture. One of them is last month that I had the opportunity to participate in Expo Prado in Uruguay, where we have the biggest agricultural and livestock presentation in the country. And in the words of the Ministry of Agriculture, Fernando Nato, he mentioned that 20 years ago, concepts like sustainability and environmental impact were not even part of the agenda of Expo Prado. 6 or 7 years ago, those topics began being part of the agenda, but they were perhaps like not so much priority. If you have an order, like ranking it from like 10 or maybe 15. So it wasn't that important either. But this year in 2021, the matter of environmental impacts and sustainability was a trending topic. It was one of the most important topics in Expo Prado. And from that, the government in Uruguay also showed how they're bringing together agriculture and environment to be able to have a study and monitoring of the environmental footprint in the livestock production. So we see how this topic is growing in agriculture in Latin America. And on the other side, yes, this week I was also reading an article in a British paper where they mentioned the launch of a new type of milk, vegetable milk. We already know almond milk, coconut milk, soy milk, and they announced the launch of a new milk made of potatoes in a market of alternative milks that already has like 400 million pounds per year. It represents 400 million pounds a year. And it was very interesting how they described a new consumer in the UK. We know concepts such as vegetarian, vegan. Perhaps we got used to a little bit more the last few years of talking about the flexigan, so those who eat meat but in a lower quantity. And in the note, they measured a new concept that was very interesting to me that was called climatarian. I want to see how that is translated by the translator, but that would be climatarian. The consumer that is concerned about the carbon footprint that the food that they consume has. And in the article, it mentioned that around 70% of the people in the UK were concerned about the carbon footprint of the food that they consume. So I think that that's very interesting because in some way it conditions the demand in these markets that are more sophisticated, more premium, and they condition a little bit the production in countries that are so important, such as Latin America, that are mainly producers of foods and agricultural products. Very briefly, I would just like to mention the idea of my presentation is just to mention how the Department of International Trade is working in Latin America. We have the UK has a presence with 20 embassies in 20 of the 34 countries in Latin America, with more than 150 people dedicated to commercial topics. But other than this division, in the embassies, a vertical one. We also have a horizontal one that is at a sectorial level. There's sectors where there's a lot of importance, like for example, education, financial services, mining, foods and beverages, infrastructure. And since last year, since the end of last year, the technology sector, the agricultural technology sector, is the new sector in DIT, so in international trade. Well, with a coordinator in Buenos Aires, which is myself, but this shows the importance that the UK is giving to this sector and the interest that they have to promote it. And more than anything, in a region like Latin America, it has a diversity regarding structures, productive structures, that is very big, with a sector that is perhaps more based, an agricultural sector that is very technified and intensive in capital, responsible for the majority of the exports perhaps in the region, and other sectors perhaps different aspects, but we can take into consideration that there's great agricultural exploitations responsible for almost $200,000 in exports. But at the same time, there's around 15 million producers, small producers, that are responsible for 50% of the production of foods in a region. So, and that ecosystem, that's where we insert the technology, the agricultural technology, and the possibility to support Latin America in this sophistication and this technification of agro. Finally, I would like to mention that the Department of International Trade also has a center of consultation that is called Inquiry Hub, and any British company that has any sort of interest in a country in Latin America can access this consultation center, and from there they are directed either to a country or to a market, an embassy in a specific country, or to one of the sectors that I previously mentioned. So this perhaps is a little bit redundant, but I do think that it's interesting to mention what is considered agri-tech in what has to do with the scope of the UK. Perhaps agri-tech, when you think about it very quickly and more condensed, you think about technologies of precision agriculture or smart agriculture, perhaps related to drones or artificial intelligence, robotics, with satellite images, all these type of technologies and platforms that help to have a better decision from the producer. But for the UK, the technology, the agricultural technology sector takes on much more than this. It's all types of solutions or innovations that help to improve the productivity and the sustainability of agriculture, of livestock, and all types of agricultures. So in this slide, we can see the four main subsectors in which we divide the sector of agricultural technology. You will see at the bottom left side of the screen, we have the sector that I was mentioning, that it's more related to precision agriculture and data systems, precision engineering, agricultural machinery, and implementation for soil measurement, land measurement, satellite images, etc. But there's also three other sectors, which is vegetable sciences, which has very important companies in everything that has to do with genetics, vegetable genetics, different agronomic solutions, nutrition, the new crop systems like greenhouses or vertical agriculture or hydroponics. Also animal science, there's a lot of development. We have a lot of companies and a lot of science in what has to do with the development of vaccines, genetic. The UK is excellent in everything that is genetics, diagnostics, pharma, nutrition, and also company animals, pets. And finally, agriculture, with a lot of strength in Scotland, the UK as well, with equipment, technology and nutrition, genetics, etc. If I had to talk about the strengths in the offer of agri-tech in the United Kingdom, it would be difficult to say in which one of these sectors perhaps there's a lot of need in animal genetics right now. But I think that as a broad concept, it's very interesting to talk about three main points that help agri-tech to really move forward in the UK. One of them is science and technology at a top level that we find in the UK with more than 100 science parks with many research and development centers, universities, as we saw yesterday and we will see throughout these 3 days, with 3 of the 10 best veterinary schools in the world are located in the UK. So that gives it a base of science and technology that's very strong. On the other hand, the supply chain, the industry in the UK is very innovative. It's continuously searching for innovation, new technologies, it's in constant growth, and it's very integrated from the farm to the end. It's very integrated and in pro of growth. And finally, the third part that is also fundamental is a government that encourages innovation constantly. So it generates a business context that is very dynamic with benefits towards innovation, with protection of patents that allows these other two sectors can move forward as well. Finally, at the bottom part, you will find the 4 innovation centers that the UK has that came up from the strategy of agricultural technology in 2013, funded by the British government, which are the Center of Excellence in Livestock, the Agri-Epicenter that has to do with precision agriculture, CHAP and crop protection, and agrimetrics and everything that has to do with big data. Finally, this is a little bit like the sponsored part of my presentation, but I would like to take advantage of the opportunity to invite you to visit the website that was recently launched just last month, where you will be able to find in red on the right side of the screen, you have the address, taking advantage of the fact that we're all facing a screen, so I invite you to do so right now if you like. But on this website, what you will find is a little bit of the condensation of what these 3 days of presentations are, where we have presentations from different innovation centers, different universities, and where we have a great address book of companies divided by sector in the UK, which are the ones who present the British offer and everything that has to do with agri-tech. You will also be able to find events, the events not just in the UK, but also in other continents, in other regions, and a lot of materials, just like you see on the left side of the screen, a lot of material related to brochures about commercial horticulture, genetics and livestock, machinery, and even companion animals. So I invite you to visit that website because it's really a good example and a very good tool for all of those who are looking for a solution and an innovation in agricultural technology. To be able to take a look at this website is really important. Finally, and just to finish up, this graph is a little bit pixeled and with a little bit of like low quality, but I think it's important to be able to show how it has been progressing in the last few years, all this related to agriculture and agritech, this link between agriculture and agritech. In the 1950s, we expected that a producer could feed 16 people, to produce food for 16 people, and 70 years later, that same producer, or well, perhaps the son or the grandson, has the capacity to feed 200 people. So this marks 2 things, I believe. One, mainly the higher demand of food and agricultural products that we are experiencing in the world, and that will keep growing because it has to grow at 60% to be able to feed almost 9,000 or 9,500 million people in 30 years. We have to produce in 30 years the same thing that was produced in the last 10,000 practically. And this, what it marks also is how the productivity, the agricultural productivity has grown. And the base of this is agricultural technology. So, well, I thought it was very important to show you this graph to be able to have a little bit of a dimension of the importance of the technology sector in agriculture. So without anything else, I would just like to thank you, and I hope that you have a very interesting session today and tomorrow. And I leave you my contact information for any questions that you might have. I'll go back to you, Maria Clara. Thank you so much.
Federico, muchísimas gracias por sus palabras y por acompañarnos en la apertura de este día. Antes de finalizar, queremos hacerle una pregunta.
Thank you so much. Federico, we have a question for you. if I'm interested in knowing what are UK technology providers, where can I get that information from? Thank you for the question. Well, this helps me to promote the web portal that I was telling you about. The address is right there. This web portal is very nice. It has a very important company directory. So the first contact point is the portal, but you also have my contact data. So I'll be very willing to direct you, to point you in the right direction, whether you're looking for a company or from about something in a particular country. So that would be the answer, Maria Clara. Well, very well. Again, Federico, thank you so much for being with us today.
Iniciamos nuestra programación académica con la conferencia Capacidades.
We'd like to get started with our academic program with the conference Capability Around Sustainability at the Manufacturing Technology Center in the UK with our guest, Mary Wells. Mary is currently the head of sustainability at Mtc, having worked in engineering for 14 years, 7 of them at the Mtc. She studied engineering, design, and technology at Warwick University, and she has also studied mechanical engineering with an environmental and social focus. She has also worked in project design and management within the security industry, and has also gone through the special purpose equipment industry. In the last 5 years, she has been actively involved in the high-value manufacturing Catapult and with the academia on circular economy. She has also led the transition at Mtc to become a sustainable company. Welcome, Mary.
Hi. I will just share my screen. So I'm going to go through a bit of our own journey and try and tie that into some of the capability we have, and hopefully you will see how that applies to agritech. So we are a RTO here, so a research and technology organization. We opened in 2011, and since then we have grown vastly. We're here to help the UK manufacturing sector to grow, and we're here to impact society. So things like sustainability are really key to what we need to be enabling. Basically, universities are considered to operate at technology readiness level 1 to 3, dealing mainly in experimental research, and manufacturing industries don't pick up technology until it's technology readiness level 7 to 9. So there's this big valley of, we call it the valley of death, where nothing happens. We can lose innovation. That's what companies like the MTC are here to resolve. We are one of 7 centres across the UK, and each of us concentrate on slightly different things. So there's the Advanced Forming Research Centre in Strathclyde. There is CPI, who concentrate on chemical engineering. There is the NAMRC, which is around nuclear manufacturing. The AMRC, who are advanced manufacturing in terms of machining capability, and that we are the Manufacturing Technology Centre concentrating on all manner of manufacture in all manner of sectors. You've got the WMG, who are very big in sort of the battery space and some of that innovation, and then you've got the NCC, who are concentrated on composites. So we all try to work together to bring cohesive, impactful solutions to manufacturing as a whole. Traditionally, we worked in the sectors you can see here, so aerospace, defense and security, construction and infrastructure, space, transport, food and drink, which is where we often tie into agri-tech and agriculture, healthcare, and utilities and oil and gas. So when it comes to sustainability, what am I talking about? Sustainability, hopefully everybody here knows, is the act of supplying the needs of the present without compromising generations to come. It's looking at things from not only an environmental perspective, but a social perspective, and how we can do that in an economically viable way. So a lot of companies now are using the Sustainable Development Goals, which you will have seen in the last presentation referred to document their journey. And I know we as the MTC are getting asked more and more questions about how we are measuring up against some of these factors, particularly climate action, particularly our carbon footprint and stuff like that. But it is a whole system. Climate and carbon are just one of the planetary boundaries. So there are 9 planetary boundaries, and I'm sorry if I'm teaching anybody to suck eggs. We are exceeding 4 currently. The key ones in agri-tech will be phosphorus and nitrogen loading, biodiversity and land use, and obviously we've got that net zero challenge, and addressing all of those scopes of emissions. So we classify, and a lot of you may have come across this, our emissions in 3 scopes: scope 1, scope 2, and scope 3. But a lot of this stuff comes down to resource use. So I personally have been quite involved in talking about how we enable a circular economy. So what is a circular economy? Currently, we have a very linear economy: make, produce, use, dispose. So how do we move from that to make, use, reuse, reduce, remanufacture, refurbish? It's all around those cycles. And those cycles here, this is the Ellen MacArthur Foundation model, or the butterfly diagram, apply to both the technological cycles, which we do quite a lot with, and also the biological cycles. In terms of the MTC, we are aiming to be carbon neutral by 2023, ideally without offsets, meaning that we have to deal with our direct emissions, our emissions that come from burning natural gas, or anything that produces greenhouse gases, to our electricity, and it also can apply to steam heating and some of those pumped in technologies. So we're looking at how we transition that, and then we are signed up to be net zero by 2041, which presents a real challenge. Scope 3, it encompasses the whole supply chain. So we've been looking at how can we define that supply chain, and how can we help businesses to define that supply chain. So our plan is, we're currently going through a process of trying to get ourselves independently benchmarked. We know what our carbon footprint is. We want to make sure that that is independently assessed. We are looking at carbon neutrality in terms of the British standard PAS 2050, as I said, including scope 1 and 2. And then for net zero and our scope 3, we're looking at the GHG protocol and science-based targets, which are becoming more increasingly recognized across industry. We largely use CO2e to measure what we're doing, along with complexity of implementation and return on investment. And we're looking at how we take our own learning and our own transition, and how we use the capability we get from that to enable others. So this is a diagram of our own carbon footprint. As you can see, scope 3 presents the largest challenge. It's most of our emissions are coming through our supply chain and our commuting. 43% of the emissions from product across sectors is from extraction of raw material and processing of raw material. So the foundation industries like agriculture are really, really key to making this change. So, as I said, scope 1 emissions are direct emissions from company-owned and controlled resources. Where are we actually creating greenhouse gases ourselves? Scope 2 are indirect emissions from company-owned and also controlled resources. So our electricity supply for us, but also that can encompass heat and steam and cooling if you're on a heat, steam and cooling network. All other indirect emissions occur in the value chain. So it's your purchase goods, it's your capital equipment, it's your fuel and energy, other fuel and energy related activities. So the distribution of that electricity and the loss in the system. How are you transporting things to and from? How is what you produce being transported and getting to the end user? What is that network? Your business travel and your employee working patterns all tie in here. I believe all of this ties into the waste hierarchy. So you can look at waste, so it's prevention, it's minimization, reuse, etc. But the same can be said of carbon. How do you avoid things that are creating wasted energy, which is a carbon emission? How are you making sure you're truly efficient in what you do? And are you transitioning to use of green energy? Offsetting obviously being the worst case scenario of the hierarchy in this case. So first off, you've got to understand what you're using. If you can't measure, you can't manage. So for us, we've been going through and trying to identify the gaps in our data, understanding how we measure what our waste is. Can any of that waste be used by someone else? The idea of industrial symbiosis. What's our gas usage? What does that look like across a day? Is there places where we're obviously wasting it? Same with water use and energy use. And what is our supply chain carbon footprint and our travel carbon footprint? And what level do we need to communicate that at? In terms of projects externally, we have done projects where we've done energy tracking and balancing to try and figure out how we would best deploy battery storage to get the most out of renewable technologies, and how we best use our photovoltaic cells. We have also been looking at how we track supplier and distribution to better bulk our distribution together. What does that look like? Can we create a tool from that to enable others? So next phase, once you've identified, is efficiency and mitigation. How do you avoid? How do you reduce? What is your site efficiency? What's your waste creation? Is there any opportunity for reduction, redistribution, and potential for reduce? Can you use secondary materials? Can you use materials that have had a life before? Because given that 43% of that carbon footprint comes from extraction of raw, if you're not using raw, then you are mitigating that carbon footprint. So also, how do you prioritize your low fuel types? Is there opportunity to go to electric or hydrogen? And where are there other greenhouse sources that you're going to have to transition to a green method of supply, basically? So for us, we need to figure out how to migrate our gas to heat pump technology, our vehicles to non-fossil fuel vehicles. So we've been quite active in the electrification space. And we've also been looking at how we enable our own reuse strategy and make sure that our assets are maintained in such a way that we can enable longevity. And also we're committing to install of our own renewable generation, install of battery storage, and commitment to a fully renewable supplier. In terms of some of the capability we have in this space, we had the Robot Highways project, which was to aid sustainability in the agriculture sector by reducing fruit waste and reduction of the requirement to use pesticides through the use of robots deployed to do various different tasks. The idea was that we could reduce fossil fuel usage across farm logistics operations and increase farm productivity. And this is done as a big collaborative project with multiple stakeholders. We've also been quite engaged with robotic projects in terms of picking challenging shapes and stiffnesses. So as you can see in the diagram, strawberry picking, for example. We've also been quite involved in the electrification space. How do you make sure a motor is sustainably designed, industrialization and scale up to allow you to have more bespoke motor tailored for your needs, relevant to what you're doing, but at a cost efficient price point. We've been highly involved in green hydrogen to fuel fleet for a client that is a large energy user. In that space, we've been looking at the generation of energy, the storage of energy, the generation of hydrogen, and the efficient use of that hydrogen. Next factor to think about is how do you increase the longevity of stuff? So remanufacturing, which is the act of refurbishing a thing to a level that it is as good as it was when it got its warranty new or better. Reconditioning and repair is to a lower level, and that is legislated. So as I mentioned before, for us it's around assets and knowing that we are not procuring stuff we don't need to procure, and using recycled materials and secondary materials rather than raw, and opportunities for industrial symbiosis with partners on our site and wider. So in terms of Mtc strategy, I've sort of just been through that rather quickly. But in terms of remanufacturing examples, we developed a system that allowed us to take a part, machine back the broken, and then deposit new material and machine back to shape using both additive and subtractive in one step. So reducing labor intensity of remanufacturing, increasing reliability, and hopefully being more cost effective. That is now an available machine because we've worked in the special purpose machine space. We also looked at cleaning projects to make sure that things are cleaned up for life extension. So where things build up over time, can you make a part more usable by cleaning it in the right way to bring it back into the supply chain? So we've done a lot around laser cleaning. In terms of recovery, we've done studies using life cycle analysis and supply chain assessment and demand profile assessment on motors and other technology. And we've looked at use of secondary materials within components like hydrogen electrolyzers. So it's using it across the whole pitch, across all the sectors. What we cannot reuse, we don't recover. So how can we reuse internally, commit to better waste management practices? For us, we do a lot around design for disassembly, design for X, design for end of life, and we are bringing life cycle analysis into that. We looked at automated disassembly techniques and separation of complex loads. So in terms of recycling examples, we have the developed systems that allow us to sort unstructured bulk input. So if you've got a load of recycling that nobody has sorted, that this can sort that through the use of robotics, visualization, and camera technology. We've also worked with a recycling partner to develop a more affordable and easily retrofittable robot pickers to enable the waste industry. And I think that brings me to the end of my presentation. Sustainability affects us all. Thank you.
Agradecemos a Mary por su conferencia.
We'd like to thank Mary for her conference. We'd like to thank Mary for her conference, and we would like to invite each of the participants so that you interact with the speakers in each of the talks by leaving their questions. So we have two questions for Marie. First question, what would be the main challenges to achieve emission reduction for 2023?
I think the biggest challenge is supply chain. And we're seeing more and more that big companies are starting to ask for specifics from their supply, but there are lots and lots of different ways of measuring carbon footprint at the moment, and lots of different ways of analyzing your impact. So I think a huge part is becoming joined up and doing it the same way, and everybody having the same understanding of what a carbon footprint is, what other impacts are, including in biodiversity and land use.
Mil gracias. Vámonos con una
Thank you so much. And now for the second question. Is there a tool that MTC has used to identify what are the activities within your operation that create the greatest carbon emissions?
So we've been using largely the GHG protocol old documentation to benchmark our carbon footprint, and using the nationally released conversion factors to allow us to assess our supply. Quite a lot of what we have been doing in the last year or two has been making sure that we have things like the right metering and stuff in place to make sure we can measure better than we could before at a better detail. But I would emphasize that it's about, though data is really, really valuable in this space, it's about the right data, because data has a carbon footprint and so do the sensors.
Muy bien, agradecemos nuevamente a Mary.
Very well. So we'd like to thank Marie again for her talk and for being with us this morning. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Continuando con nuestra programación, damos paso al Dr. Mas
Moving on
Ahmad.
with our presentation, we now welcome Dr. Mas Ahmad with his presentation, The Project for Control and Monitoring of Cocoa in Colombia. Dr. Mas Ahmad has a title in mechanic engineering, and he received his PhD from the Warway University in industrial automation and an MBA from the Ashton University in manufacturing. He has worked in several sectors, including oil and gas, automotive, aerospace, renewable energies, agriculture, and more recently, the construction, where he applies digital technologies and of automation to be able to achieve efficiencies and increase productivity. Currently, he is the manager for technology in Mtc, supervising a team of engineers that develop technologies that are innovative in automation, mechatronics, and manufacturing of electronic products. Welcome, Dr. Mas.
Thanks very much for having me, and thank you very much for inviting me to talk. I'll be talking through a project that the MTC has been delivering over the last 3 years called Colco, and we've been delivering that with a partner in the UK called the Satellite Applications Catapult. So I'll talk through that project and then hopefully answer any questions that anybody might have at the end. So Marie did talk briefly about Catapult Centers, but just very briefly, Catapult Centers are innovation centers. We are research and technology organizations, and we seek to collaborate with other organizations as opposed to compete, so that we can, through collaboration, have a really increased impact. And the UK Catapult Centers are government backed, and we're neutral, and therefore we perceive ourselves to be and perceived by others to be trusted entities. So we don't have any particular preference for a particular technology, a technology supplier. We look to find the best solution for the application at hand. So what I'll talk through over this presentation is talk through the vision for the Colco project and what we did and how it relates to the theme of this conference, some of the challenges that we were trying to address, and then move on to the culture of the project and the strategy for how we went about delivering it, some of the project objectives and even some of the outputs we'll talk through at a high level, and then share some of the learnings which I hope can be applied in other agri-tech and agri-food type projects in the region, and hopefully open the doors towards collaboration in the future. So I'll start with the vision of the project. So we started out with this understanding that we wanted to address two key challenges that were faced in the cacao sector in Colombia. The first one was around reducing waste and increasing climate resilience, and that aligns with Sustainable Development Goal number 2, where it's about zero hunger. So by reducing waste and increasing climate resilience, we should be moving towards more abundant food supply that can help prevent hunger as well. And then the second goal that we were aligned to was responsible consumption and production. And that was around increasing yields and not increasing the farming area. So one of the challenges that exists in the Colombian market for cacao, and this is true actually for many crops, where subsistence farming, smallholder farmers, they really struggle to make ends meet. And as a result of that, there is a tendency to increase the farming area through deforestation. And as we know, trees are an excellent carbon sink, and through deforestation, we're actually increasing the carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. So this is a really important, and obviously that also increases or decreases the biodiversity in what is a very biodiverse part of the world. So by looking at how we can increase the yields and how we can do more with what we have, we really wanted to show how we could be more responsible about our about production. So the vision we set out on the back of that alignment to those goals was that we wanted Colombia's cacao sector to be the global leader in sustainable production of fine quality cacao. For those in the know, Colombia is very famous for its unique cacao properties, which are superior to the outputs from example, by West Africa, like Ivory Coast and Ghana, due to the different varieties of cacao that are grown here. We also wanted Colombia to be recognized as being at the forefront of technology adoption and social innovation, which would be underpinned by Colco, and we wanted to deliver growth, equality, and prosperity to all smallholder farmers in Colombia. We kicked off the project around July 2018, which was about a 2-year phase of designing of solutions and implementation of those solutions, but I'll talk through in a moment. Then we did more testing and trials from June 2020 until, and that will continue until the end of this year. And then from next year onwards, we really want to scale up and really deliver impact at a broader scale as well. So some of the contextual challenges I wanted to share was firstly around pre-harvest production. So about 50% of yield is expected to be lost as a result of climate change, and that obviously impacts the income that these farmers have. In addition to that, many of the crop is susceptible to pest and disease, and we know from speaking to farmers associations and cooperatives in country that actually pest and disease has a massive impact on the productivity, which can impact yields by up to 60%. And that again drives those behaviors, those undesirable behaviors around deforestation. There's also challenges around inaccurate weather information. So for example, if a farmer is looking to put fertilizer down, they think it might be maybe a dry afternoon and it starts to rain, there's two challenges there. One is that you start to contaminate water supplies with fertilizer. And then the other is that the farmer then has to go out and buy more. So it has both an environmental and an economic impact. The other aspect, which is a key challenge in the cacao production, is the fermentation process. So fermentation contributes about 70% of the total quality of cacao. And what we observed and what the sector is in agreement with is that there are a real lack of consistency in the fermentation process. It's the lack of standardization, quality is inconsistent, and one of the impacts of that is subsequent to the fermentation process is the drying process. And when you're not really following that process as it should be, and that usually means achieving a certain level of humidity, that results in waste, because when you don't hit that level of humidity, that cacao gets subjected to mold and it can no longer be used, and that increases the amount of waste in the supply chain. That reduction in productivity, of course, will impact the farmer, and then we go back into that cycle of farmer incomes being impacted and undesirable behaviors. So to address that, we pulled together a strategy to define how we would go about addressing these challenges. So the first thing is, as a project, we underpinned our work by both our culture and through our strategy. So we have our vision, and through our culture, we defined our values, and those in turn informed our behaviors, and those in turn informed our practices. And on the strategic side of things, we set out our goals, that set out our processes, that set out our activities, and through those practices and activities, we sought to achieve our desired results. And this is a really important part of our project delivery, is that when we taking a technical activity, we reflect on, does that fit within the culture of the project, so that we're heading and doing this development in the right way. And then just focusing now on the strategic side, how did we go about kind of architecting the solution? So for us, one of the important things, and the previous speaker, Marie, mentioned this as well, is it's really important to understand what's going on. It's important to measure what's happening on the ground. So we look to first start with capturing data, which means deploying the right sensors and capturing the right data, so that we can make decisions, and we can make decisions that are informed by that data. Then we'd look to then distribute those decisions, so those people that are affected by that data and by that decision would have in turn the ability to make a decision, so that, for example, if you're getting weather predictions, those weather predictions should be going to the right people. And then the next stage is about measuring the impact of that decision. So one of the other things, and I'll talk through that very briefly in the next slide, is it's not just about economic gains. It's not just about increasing productivity. It's doing that in balance with the environment, so that we're not, so that we've got a long-term view of the impact that we're having, and that in turn again drives us to capture the right data. So it's very iterative in terms of how we developed our strategy for the project. So this is a similar diagram as to the one that was presented before, but it's very much around understanding the foundation and the ceiling for how we need to operate. And so when we talked about the data that we needed to capture, it was saying, how do we make sure that we're operating within that social foundation and ecological ceiling, so that we are, really long-term sustainable as a project and as an output. So I've talked through kind of the high-level strategy, the vision, and now I just want to bring that down into some more tangible activities. So we wanted to, as part of our mission, implement an integrated technology solution for monitoring the entire value chain. And that was because we wanted to, as I said before, increase the yield, but also the quality, because we recognize the opportunity to access, for example, new markets which would really value that additional quality, pay more for it, and therefore reduce the incentive for some of those undesirable behaviors. And then to do that, we look to deliver monitoring and quality assessment capabilities across the value and supply chain, and look to have more reliable and efficient production and more competitive, sustainable business models. So we distributed activities across 2 centers. I've mentioned the satellite catapult already, and then obviously the MTC, which is where I sit, where we developed fermentation, drying, monitoring and control system, and a cacao bean quality assessment system. And all of those services were underpinned by a data repository, which in turn were underpinned by a set of sustainable business models. So I'll talk through some of these solutions very quickly. So one of them was around weather forecasting. So it's enabling a move from unreliable seasonal farming to weather-based actions, and that in turn mitigates those climate risks, because as I mentioned before, with uncertainty, the actions that you take will have an increased risk of not having the outcome that you desire. Then we had the fermentation system. So this was around increasing and standardizing the fermentation process, and that increases the consistency. And because we are capturing data about that process and storing it in a central repository, we then have ability to trace back and understand how that cacao performed, and thereby make improvements in the future. We also developed a quality assessment tool to estimate cacao quality and facilitate more transparent trading of cacao through the supply chain. And that's about understanding where the cacao is coming from, what the quality is, and making sure it aligns with standards and the desired criteria. And all of that data that we were collecting from various solutions would be stored in a secure data repository that integrated all of those different data sets, so that the users of this data could have a better understanding about what was going on the ground. And that in turn means that you can make decisions about, are there certain farmers that are not performing as they should be, because maybe their pest and disease management practices aren't working for them. So let's go and help them and find out what's going on. So this is all about having data-driven information, providing transparency to the supply chain. And then this takes that one step further. So we looked then at the next level to say, well, how can we provide real transparency and real traceability using that data we've collected, so that the users, so the supply chain can really visualize what's happening. And this is 2 benefits. Firstly, you can visualize what's going on and make those data-driven decisions, but also you can start to use data in new ways that we may not have considered before. So one example was what I've got on the top right, which is around fermentation processes and fermentation recipes. So before, you would have the process as it was, and then we started to add kind of gates, so we could see, is the process being followed as we'd expect it to be? Why isn't it? What's the impact of that? And that in turn allows us to then share that learning back to the farmers. And with all of this, because we're striving to increase quality as much as we are yield, you're then able to access new markets, and those markets which should then trust the cacao that's coming out, pay a higher amount for it, and that reduces the need for things like deforestation. So then I've talked a lot about the technology. The other thing that we had to do was make sure that all of those solutions were underpinned by sustainable business models. Excuse me. So one of the things here was around how do we gather the ecosystem that we've developed in Colombia, and that consisted of traders, associations, chocolate manufacturers, etc. how do we bring them together and help them to drive and develop business models that they would then take forward, and that those business models are underpinned by the right values as well, which I mentioned at the beginning about having the right culture. So we developed these business models in a collaborative manner and made sure that when we were developing them, we were making sure that the right behaviors were integrated into these business models as well. One of the things that we concluded as part of this project was that there was a need for a data institution, which would be a neutral entity that would be collectively governed by all of the representatives of the supply chain stakeholders to make data sharing much more effective and allow those decisions to be made more easily. So I'll close with some of the key learnings that we learned over the last 3 years of this project. So the first one is that sustainability happens in systems and not in isolation. So understanding the overarching system is very, very important, because otherwise any intervention you do may have unintended consequences. So it's very important to make sure that we are gathering information and data from various perspectives. The other aspect was around ensuring that we were integrating and co-producing with native solutions. So it's not about going in and saying this is the right way to do it. It's more about being collaborative, taking on the views of those that would look to use a solution, and understanding how we can complement and augment what's already there to stand the greatest chance of success of actual adoption of technology. And the key thing was that in systems, because what we're doing here is what we call a wicked problem, there's no real clear understanding of what the solution is. The importance of developing the right relationships is actually often more important than actually having the right solution or having the right answer, because the right answer will emerge as you have stronger and stronger relationships where you can challenge each other, critique outcomes and output, and make sure that you are collaboratively developing the right solution. So I just wanted to wrap up here and say that some of the conclusions we've derived from this is that we understood as we went into this project that low yields were driving increased deforestation, and that in turn needs to be managed through better on-farm control and also balancing that with accessing and creating new market opportunities. So that could be something like bean-to-bar products. Climate change is driving a need for increased resilience in farms, and that could be realized through increased foresight. So we've talked about weather predictions and the benefit that has in terms of both productivity for the farm, but also mitigating some of those challenges around water contamination, etc. Data informs the decisions and balances the needs of humanity with environmental boundaries. So this is that diagram I showed where we have to look at data and make sure we're making decisions that balance, that find that right balance between the ceiling and the floor. The project team, we're seeking opportunities to build upon the outputs that we've established within the Colco project, and continue to leverage our neutral and trusted entity status to continue to develop these types of solutions. So we're very keen to continue developing ecosystems. It doesn't have to be in cacao, and share our learning on how to create these sustainable business models that look to support and improve supply chains. I just wanted to kind of close on just a refresher on that strategy, this piece around using that data to make informed decisions and distributing them so that we can measure the impact and then continue to tweak as we go. That's all from me. Thank you very much for listening. I'm happy to field any questions.
Muchas gracias, Dr.
Thank you very much, Dr. Mas Asmat, for your participation. We have several questions from the audience. We will start with the first one. First of all, thank you for all the information that you have provided. And the question is, how can we access the Colco application?
Well, if you want to, you can reach out to me. I'm sure the organizers can provide information, contact information, and then we can share more information about how to access the solution.
Very well. We have more questions. At a long term, what are the transformations that the project hopes to have in the cacao sector in Colombia?
So one of the key things for us is leveraging the unique properties and unique qualities that Colombia cacao has and presenting that at the international market so that you're no longer competing with the high volume producers in, for example, West Africa. You're in a position where very premium markets, bean-to-bar type markets, are being accessed, where premiums can be extracted, and that in turn drives growth in that sector because it becomes far more attractive than it is currently. The other thing is around distributing the manufacturing of chocolate products as well. So, at the moment, there are a couple of very large chocolate manufacturers, and they do a lot to support farmers, and they do a lot to make sure that the cacao is sustainable, etc. But there's also opportunities to look at how smaller farms, smaller associations can come together to create chocolate products, which would maybe come from their farm and having more of a single source approach. So those are some of the things. I think ultimately it's about making the cacao sector more sustainable, more attractive, reducing the impact it might have on the environment, so that we can all continue to eat chocolate, really.
Very well, thank you so much. We see that the audience is participating very much, and we appreciate your participation. But because of time, we have a space just for one last question. With which institutions in Colombia was the project Colco worked on, in which areas of the country?
So we worked with a number of organizations. One of our closest collaborators, I guess, was Group Inaccurate, so CNCH. They continue to be an important partner. There's also Fede Cacao and another company called CCC. And then in addition to that, we've been working with a number of technology partners, including a company called Dextera, Netex, and Cropper. We have deployed systems in the region of Antioquia mostly, but we've also been up to the north in Santa Marta, which I don't think is Antioquia. I can't remember the name of the department. So yeah, that's mostly where we've been operating, and also in the kind of cacao central, I guess, which is San Vicente de Sucuri, which is where a lot of the cacao is produced. So we've worked with farms over there as well.
Okay, este es el tiempo que tuvimos para las preguntas.
Okay, this is the time that we had for questions. Dr. Mac Akma, thank you very much for your participation and for being with us in Connect Agro series.
Thank you.
Seguimos con nuestra programación con el profesor.
We continue with our program with Professor Simon Pearson and his talk, Digitalization of the UK Food Supply Chain. Professor Pearson is director of the Lincoln Institute for Agri-Food Technology at the University of Lincoln and has become a leader in interdisciplinary research in agricultural technology, gathering together academic and industrial experts that strive to improve technological, environmental, and human capital aspects of food industry. This research includes a wide spectrum of agri-technology applications like robotic systems, automation, and design for the building of integrated electronic centers for agricultural vehicles. Simon tries to develop agricultural robotics to promote productivity in the agro-food section, including crop collection, phenotyping, and crop care. Doctor, welcome.
Thank you. I'll share my screen if that's okay. So, good morning, everybody. So thank you for this opportunity to talk to you today. I thought what I'd do, I'd truncate my talk a bit today and just really give an overview on robotic technologies in agriculture. Whilst I've got a UK context to my talk, all of these technologies can be applied internationally and in Colombia and many circumstances. And what I'd like you to think about is just the principles that we've used to actually solve some of these problems, because they can be deployed worldwide. So I work at Lincoln Institute of Agri-Food Technology, and as I said, I'm very much an interdisciplinary researcher. And in my institute, LIAT, we've got about 60 odd people, and we work in the most beautiful place, one of the most beautiful farms in England, which is an estate called Rhizome Farm, and it's just about 10 kilometres north of the city of Lincoln, which is on the east coast. The city of Lincoln's a beautiful city. It's a medieval city. It's got a very famous cathedral. It's about 1,000 years old. And in the cathedral, we've got quite an important bishop. And my institute, LIAT, used to be the bishop's winter house, his residence. So that building on the top right was the bishop's palace, and that's now become my institute. So the bishop's left, and we now work in agri-robotics at that institute. So fantastic site and some great people. What I'm going to talk to you today is really about the some issues around the food system, why we really need to be stepping on the gas and really trying to accelerate development in this sector with a whole range of approaches, digital technologies, robotics, and use of AIs. Why do we need to really accelerate? Well, the point of it is first of all, my first comment is, all I'd say is 3 months is a long time in the eternal food system. And just look what's happened in the last 3 months. And there's some UK things here, but there's some global issues. So worldwide gas prices have gone up. That's driven up price of nitrogen. So price of nitrogen's gone up from about $200 a ton up to about sort of $400-500 a ton just in the last few months. Extraordinary inflation on nitrogen, which is critical for all farmers worldwide. Worldwide, there's a shortage of labour, so every country is running out of labour, and in England particularly, we've got a shortage of HGV drivers, but we've got a real crisis on farms on access to labour. So in the United Kingdom, there's about 70,000 people who pick fruit and vegetables. Normally they've been seasonal migrants. They've come in from the United Kingdom from Romania, Bulgaria, Latvia, Lithuania, all over to come and pick fruit and vegetables. But because of COVID and Brexit and other issues, that pool of labour's dried up. And these are challenges faced in worldwide agriculture. So if you go to China, they're running out of people because the demographics of age is working against them. If you go to Japan, the average age of farmers is 69. If you go to the United States, they're running out of people to pick fruit and vegetables in California, in Washington State. All those sort of real powerhouses of the American agricultural economy are running out of people. So we've got a people crisis. Then if you look at it on the right, there's an inflationary crisis for consumers. So look at the price of wheat. It's the highest price it's been for the last 5 years. Where will it stop? We don't know. Maybe it'll plateau, who knows? But it's a high price. Now that's okay if you're a farmer, but remember that farmer's got to pay more for his nitrogen, but it's not great if you're a consumer. So food inflation is going to hit. And then coffee price, I just put that one up, and you can see that's high. So it's good if you're a coffee grower in Colombia, maybe, but you might have had to pay more for your labour. But if you're a coffee consumer, which I think most of the world are, then that's not good news. And then all in all, these things create real problems. And there's a lovely little picture in the centre of the screen here, which shows some of the problems that's going on in England. So certain foods just aren't being stocked. So this shop here was using cardboard cutouts instead of vegetables. So these are all big problems. These are serious problems which affect everybody globally. And when I say the food system is the eternal system, of course it is. Everybody has to eat. And these are problems faced by farmers, but also society. Then you've got to then put on climate change. And we're about to run into COP26, which is the big climate event taking place in the UK next week. And climate change is probably one of the biggest threats that we're facing. This is a long-term challenge. And this is just a picture, I think it sums it up. It's John Deere tractor, big heavy one. And this is a farm which is very wet. There's been lots of rainfall, but around the world, climate's changing in a very unpredictable way. You've got droughts, floods, high temperatures, cold temperatures, winds, storms, hurricanes, lots of uncertainty and lots of predictability, and that's going to affect food security for all. These are big challenges. So how do we deal with some of those challenges? What are we going to do to deal with it? So we're not going to stick our head in the sand. We've got to actually go out there and come out fighting, and we've got to do something about it. What we work in is robotics and digital technologies for agriculture, and particularly agri-robotics. And we're looking at technologies which hopefully can transform the lives of farmers, make farming more resilient, more productive, and with a lower environmental impact. So what are those technologies? Why do we look at agri-robotics? We do interdisciplinary research. And what's the best way to do interdisciplinary research? Well, it's about putting communities of people together and making them look at other people's problems through their own eyes. And so what we did, we looked at agri-robotics, and we said to the agri-robotic community, we gathered the community and we said, that's one question. What is it for agriculture that is interesting to roboticists? And then we reversed it and said, what is it for robotics that is interesting to agriculturalists? And we came up with this diagram, and the top half just shows the agricultural opportunity in agri-robotics. And we identified 3 things: selective harvesting, crop care, so caring the crops with robots instead of using pesticides, and phenotyping, accelerated breeding the crops. That's 3 examples where we thought robotics could help agriculture. And then we asked, what is it that agriculture can help roboticists with? Well, actually, agriculture is a brilliant place to be if you're a roboticist. And if you do things like manipulation and grasping in robotics, you need those skills if you're going to pick fruit and vegetables or coffee beans or even cacao pods. Image processing, so you might need to recognize those cacao pods. You might want to detect disease on them, phytophthora or whatever. We also then said, if you work in fleet and swarm robotics, what is it about agriculture that's interesting? Well, actually, you need hundreds of robots to solve some of these problems. So you need big swarms. And then we said to the community, you know, if you're into autonomy, what is it about autonomy that's interesting? Well, you've got to have robots going all over the farm environment. So there's lots and lots of interdisciplinary challenges. This is a wonderful, rich area for interdisciplinary research. So just a few things. So short history of robotics and AI at Lincoln. And I just wanted to show you a picture. And this is what I call the known knowns. This is the state of the art on English farms in 1980. And this is how we were picking fruit and vegetables. And actually think about this as many, many crops that you're growing in Colombia. It's probably the same thing. So we had very high dependency on labor to pick fruit and vegetables. Lots of people, you see them in this picture, with very low technology equipment, just a push cart. What is the status now? What was the status in 2020? How has the industry evolved? Well, it hasn't. That's the point. So it hasn't evolved in 40 years, but it now has to evolve because we're running out of people. So robotics is going to be absolutely key for foundation of agriculture in the future. So we need to evolve. So what are we doing about it? These just show some of the technologies we're developing at Lincoln. If you remember that big heavy tractor, what we think is going to happen is we're going to see a world with many, many more machines, but lighter weight machines, with robots particularly. And those will be autonomous without a driver. And this video just shows some of the machines we're working with. These are little Norwegian robots, called a 4-valve robot. It's a very high performance modular lightweight vehicle, weighs 200 kilograms. It's got a battery life of 8 hours, and it's got 4 500-watt motors, very high torque. And because they're low cost, you can have a fleet of them. So rather than one big green tractor, why not 12 lightweight robots, more resilient, more sustainable for the environment, all electric, not diesel. So how do we go about training these robots? And this just shows the way that the robot mind works. And the top pane shows the robot view of the world, and the bottom shows the real world. And the key thing that you have to do is get your autonomy correct. So autonomy is our first step, and that's the first thing we did. So we programmed these robots to be able to wander around the environment on their own. This is another video. This shows a robot. It's a digital twin. You see the robot world in the top pane, and at the bottom you see the real world, which is the crop, and that's the image panes at the bottom. And this robot's taking pictures of some strawberries. It could be a coffee plant or a cocoa plant. It doesn't really matter. It could be anything. It's taking an image of that crop and collecting data about that crop and the state of that crop. So it's and that might be for fruit forecasting, detecting disease. Then we've gone out and we've used these robots in the real world. And we've now got 12 of these robots working in England, and they've done 7,000 kilometers of autonomy since March. So very solid. And we're finding new ways to treat disease with robots. And this is using ultraviolet C, UVC radiation, to eradicate a nasty disease called powdery mildew. And the mildew's on all sorts of crops worldwide, but UVC seems to work. So we've got rid of that pest using robots and autonomy, and without using pesticides. And this shows the same robot in Florida. So it could be anywhere in the world. We've got robots in Florida, robots in Greece, France, Norway, all over. If you can actually get autonomy, you can then use robots for fleet support. So this is as what's called an AGV, or autonomous guided vehicle. This is to support fruit picking. So what happens here is the picker will call a robot to them when they pick their fruit, and the robot takes the picked fruit away, replaces with empty trays. So we have an algorithm which can detect where that robot is anywhere, where a person is anywhere on a farm. And this just shows it in operation. In the top pane, you'll see 2 pickers picking away very quickly, and they're going to call a robot any minute. That robot's going to find them. It's going to travel to them. It's going to take that fruit away from them. It's going to take that fruit to a pack house and give them some empty trays to keep working. That drives productivity by 20%. And then we're working on picking, and we've been, you know, imagine this could be a coffee bean, or it could be a cacao pod, as far as I care. But this just shows that one of the ways where you can pick. So you've got autonomy, you can put a fruit picker on that vehicle and you can pick fruit. That's advanced robotics. The other area that we're really interested in is in fruit forecasting. And this is AI or machine learning using image recognition to detect fruit. You can see these strawberries. It could be any fruit. And they're detecting them, they're measuring their size, and they're estimating the yield and the maturity state. That's happening in real time. So you can see just in that example of strawberries where robots can transform agriculture. Strawberries are really at the tip of the spear. So this is where most of the work has been done. But as we develop these technologies, we're hoping to see them in a range of projects. And this is also, I think, as referred to earlier, a project called Robot Highways that we're heavily involved with in the UK. So you can see some examples there. Next example where we think robots are going to be key is for things like phenotyping or advanced plant breeding. And this robot is phenotyping wheat. So it's collecting vast swaths of data on wheat with very advanced sensors. And that sensor in the foreground there is a line LiDAR, a line laser system, which is creating a 3D map of that canopy so we can spot traits and breed wheat at a much more accelerated rate. Now that creates all sorts of bottlenecks, particularly data bottlenecks, and we've now got a 5G equipment to collect that data. Extraordinary bandwidths of data are now being collected. And the final one I've got is crop care. So this is 3 nuns in Belgium in about 1910. This is the standard way which worldwide people have killed weeds for tens of thousands of years. And that's with a hoe and a bit of metal or a stone to kill that weed. So it's a pretty effective way to kill weeds, but it's very expensive. And it's only quite a recent thing that we've had pesticides. So these were invented during the Second World War. And you've got things like 2,4-D, glyphosate, Roundup Ready. But worldwide, there's very, very few new pesticides being developed because they cost billions of dollars. And there's all sorts of very challenging environmental problems with using pesticides. So we're running out of pesticides. So what can we do? Again, robotics might be key. And this image on the right, this video on the right, just shows a robot weeder. And there's a number of these being developed worldwide. This one we've worked with. What this has got is a camera on the front of the tractor, and that's identifying the crop plant and then weeding all around the crop plant. So it's a robot, and it's using decision support to make a decision, and you can see it working there. It's just trying to get rid of those weeds around those lettuces. And these technologies are now available, and they're now commercial, and you can buy those technologies. So robots are really advancing at pace. So that's just 3 examples, but in the context of Colombia, there's many, many examples where robots are going to come. And I just sort of summarize this. We've got going into COP26, British Prime Minister Boris Johnson made a speech at the United Nations in September. And he made this comment, which I thought was quite relevant. He says, and every day green startups are producing new ideas, feeding to cows to restrain the traditional science of digestive approval, to robots to enhance food production. And he's absolutely right. And these are all of the modern technologies which are going to make agriculture and food production more resilient, lower costs for everybody, and increase our ability to respond to grand challenges such as climate change. And so with that, I'm going to hand back now. So thank you very much. I hope that was interesting, and I look forward to any questions.
Mil gracias, Professor Pearson, por la
Thank you so much, Professor Pearson, for your talk and for being at our event. We have several questions from the audience. We're going to start with the first one. It's possible to see the results of this research that you have done at the Institute?
Absolutely, yeah. It's published worldwide. Have a look on our webpage. There's lots of information. And if you are interested and want to take it forward, just please send me an email, get in touch, or just ping me on LinkedIn. So absolutely, very, very happy to chat about what we're doing. Most of this is public research, and then some of it's industry funded, but the public research is certainly open to everybody.
Muy bien, muchas gracias. Vamos a
Thank you very much. We have more questions from the audience. Now that you have identified these opportunities, what's going to happen with robotics in the agro question? Have you involved the private sector to take advantage of the potential in the market?
Yes, it's very, very important. And we see a real flow of the research to innovation to industry. And what we try to do in the Institute is do everything or support across the whole of the technology development layer. So we do basic research in robotics. So that's things like the autonomy. And that can be applied in many, many areas. So if you've got one robot which can wander around a fruit field, it can wander around a cornfield or a maize field or whatnot. So basic research. And we do a lot of innovation research, which is usually collaborative with industry. And then we launch a lot of startup companies, or we're trying to launch a number of startup companies. So we, as an institute, we won't change the world. We can't, we don't have the capacity to do it, but we can create ideas for other people to grab hold of in industry who can change the world. And that's what we want to do. So we want to put these tools in the hands of other people.
Muy bien, muchas gracias, profesor.
Very well, thank you, Professor. So now we continue with our last question. Just one more question. Have you do tests in mountainous terrain with picker robots?
The answer is I've been to Colombia in mountainous terrain, and it's really difficult. There are people who are working on forms of robots which can wander around mountainous terrain. So Boston Dynamics have some very special robots, which almost legged robots rather than wheels. But that's really difficult. What I think you'll see there is sort of a halfway house where you'll have what's called collaborative robots. And that's where you might have some robotics, but you'll always have a human in the loop trying to make that work, because some of those challenges are very difficult.
Gracias, profesor.
Thank you, Professor. So we have time for one more question, just one more from our audience. And it says, aside from the research that you have performed to show the potential of robotics in agriculture, do you have data regarding the impact as far as profitability and climate change impact?
Yeah, so a lot of our research we do in our research institute, but everywhere we can, we try to get it out on farms. And when we get robots on farms, we always collect performance data, and we're very interested in ROIs, return on investments. And the fruit picking work's got very strong ROIs because, quite frankly, it's replacing labour, which was expensive, but it now doesn't exist, so we don't have it. So there's a very strong ROI for fruit picking robotics. For things like phenotyping, there's very strong ROIs because you're breeding a new crop variety which can be sold internationally to many thousands of farmers. So that's got a strong ROI. For things like replacing pesticides, it's more difficult because usually those are applied over very large areas, and the cost of the pesticides is not huge relative to the production costs. So that's more challenging. But where robotics is going to really come in is when all those pesticides have been taken away, there's no alternative. So farmers are going to have to use them, and then there's going to be an ROI. So it's a really good question, and it's something we follow closely. And really what's going to drive these robots into the real world, into industry, is the ROI. So we always measure it.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Professor Pearson, for your talk and for being at our event.
Thank you. Pleasure. Honor.
Invitamos a todos a un Gracias a cada uno de los que nos siguen
Thank you
acompañando.
to each one of you who are still with us right now. And we also would like to welcome those who are logging on now. Please remember that you can ask questions to each one of our speakers in the chat so that they can respond live at the end of their presentations. Now we will have our speaker, Elizabeth Orcas, with her presentation, B Corps, Triple Impact and Supply Chains. Elizabeth is passionate for working to generate social transformations that positively impact communities. She has more than 12 years of experience managing and developing strategic alliances, structuring social projects, and collecting funds of high impact. Currently, she is the Director of Development of B Systems in Colombia, looking for opportunities for connection between projects that work as vehicles of collective impact, contributing to the social and environmental challenges that might be resolved from the impact business models of B Corps and other stakeholders. She is a professional in finances and foreign trade and specialist in organizations, social responsibility, and development of the Andes University. Welcome, Elizabeth. Thank you very much. Thank you all for this invitation and to all the people who are here with us today. Well, today I would like to tell you more about B System, who we are, and for this I will begin with a video. Very interesting video that will tell us what the B System is. Everything has changed: fashion, transportation, communications, what we eat, even the way we do business. From this to this, the next generation of leaders of businesses. What caused the change? The state is the only solution. It's not the only solution. They're taking us towards an inclusive market that is creating. Now we cannot just question ourselves the role of businesses, society in society. We must be part of the solution and use businesses to do good. 2,200 B companies of 150 different industries present in more than 50 countries. We are building a global movement that recognizes our interdependency. We're just missing one thing: you. Together with the smartphone and IA, B companies are one of the innovations that are more important, that changed and will continue changing the world. According to Fast Company, we're one of the economic movements that is most important in the last 20 years. More than 6,000 articles have been written about us, and all of the world, more than 600 universities teach about B Corps, and more than 12 countries are working for new laws. This is the future. Dozens of businesses are still working in our model. It's time to share our small secret. We must translate towards an economy that is inclusive so that businesses can work for everyone. And surprise, you will have clients that are very happy, the best talents, just by doing what's best for the world.
Bueno, esto es lo que es Sistema B.
Okay, so this is what the B System is. B System is a global movement. As you can see, we're present at an international level. Basically, it's a model that looks to redefine the sense of success in economy. And as we've seen in the crisis situations that we have, not just in social and environmental matters, have made it that definitely our industry is really questioning what are the changes that have to be done from now. What should I, as a business person, start thinking about in terms of my social and environmental impacts? We know that all companies give special interest to financial indicators, but precisely when we redefine the sense of success in the economy, we have to start measuring those social and environmental impacts with the same intensity and with the same importance that financial indicators are measured with. What we look for with this measurement is to look for the strength of the market to provide solutions to the challenges that are already found in social and environmental terms. B system, as I was previously mentioning, is present in all of the world. It's known in Latin America, we're known in Latin America as B system, and in the rest of the world, with our international partner, which is B Lab. It's more than 4,000 B companies that are certified in this new economy. In Latin America specifically, more than 700 companies, and in Colombia, we have 70 companies, out of the which we have Juan Valdez, Crepes and Waffles, Alqueria, and others that are definitely changing the structure of businesses and using the strength of that business model to provide solution to topics that every day we find in social and environmental topics. Other than this, we have companies that are still very committed to zero net emissions, but we believe that it is a very big challenge. And that's why today we're here today in this space, inviting you to also get to know this movement and see how it can help your companies and that contribute in all these social and environmental challenges. Definitely, big companies are companies that do not just follow this economic benefit, but that are also very interested in seeing how they can impact socially and environmentally communities and the environment. And that's why as a movement, what we do is invite companies to take a sense of responsibility with society and the environment. Definitely, we know that consumers change. They changed their way of thinking. They changed the way of demanding towards companies and consuming. That's why today we believe that this type of movement is key so that the economy changes and therefore we can have a better world for everyone. As organization, we have very useful tools that I will tell you about today that of course we invite you to please use them, they're free. The first is the impact evaluation. The impact evaluation is an extremely wholesome tool. It's a tool that allows companies to assess synchronically governance, workers, clients, community, and environment. So what it helps the company to do is to find their business model and their higher purpose, which means why I have this company, what do I look for, what impact am I really generating from my organization, from the different areas that we find here, the 5 key points, and how through those activities that I execute every day in my organization, I can really be impacting my different stakeholders, whether they're communities where I'm located, my employees, my clients, or my supply chain. What this tool allows is that any company of any industry, of any sector, of any size can answer these types of tools because it's a very adaptive tool. What it does is that it works as a decision tree. So all the companies that answer the assessment have different and diverse opportunities for response because this evaluation adapts depending on what type of company is responding it. When it works as a decision tree, then different paths open up and I can start finding not just which are those opportunities for improvement, but also which are those strengths that as a company I have within my organization. It is a tool that will allow to compare yourself with the rest of the world in your own sector, in your own industry, and that allows also to establish which are those points in which perhaps I could focus myself on, establish an action plan, and why not an improvement plan. The tool, what it allows us is that as it's being answered, and once we have a benchmarking report, because the tool allows at the end of answering it to have a benchmarking report that will allow us to establish, okay, these are those strengths that as an organization I have, but I also have opportunities for improvement. How can I really start putting these points or strategies forward to really comply with what I want as an organization? It's really a free online tool, 100% confidential. It has the highest standards at a world level, and the B stamp is recognized at an international level, which allows that all the companies that use the evaluation can create action plans that are effective and that really can be applied depending on the context. This evaluation also is complemented by the SDG Action Manager. It's very important that companies are aligned with the Sustainable Development Objectives, the compliance, and especially with the 2030 Agenda. This is why this tool complements the B Impact Assessment. It was created by the Global Pact of the United Nations and B Lab, our international partner, to precisely measure the Sustainable Development Objectives, which means that as I answer the B Impact Assessment, I can also get to know which are those objectives of sustainable development that in these diverse areas and my diverse stakeholders I'm complying with, and perhaps I'm not even identifying. So we invite you once again from B System so that you can use them, so that you can access them. They're completely free, and they will allow you, if right now you don't have an action plan with reference to the measurement and management of your triple impact, you can start using them and you can start reviewing them. The assessment and B System as itself helps companies not just create that higher purpose and that assessment in the 5 areas that we previously saw, but it also allows to establish my business model, my impact business model, which is how basically through my sales, I can really generate social and environmental impacts. For this, I brought in 2 examples of these companies. There's 4,000 companies as we saw around the world. But I wanted to bring Reseco, which is one of our certified B companies that was recently certified. It's dedicated to recollecting used cooking oil for the production of biofuels. So their business model, their impact model, is completely related to a challenge that we found in terms of the environment. Therefore, through their business model, they're helping to mitigate contamination in water sources, sewage being clogged, disease from human consumption, and responsible production and consumption. It's a company that's located here in Barranquilla, and thanks to the B Impact Assessment and all of the process of being a certified B company, we can see that they're directly impacting 2 sustainable development objectives, which can be even more. On the other side, we also have EcoPoop, which EcoPoop is also a B certified company that is located here in Colombia. They were born from a very personal experience from their executive director. And like all of us, we have pets in almost all homes. And it turns out that one of their daughters contracted a bacteria from a feces of their pet. From that process, they started researching what was really the use that was being given to the pet's feces. And what she did was create EcoPoop, which is a company that what they look for is to transform dog feces into organic fertilizer, and therefore contributing directly to all of the environmental processes that are considered. So basically what we look for is to look out for human health, promote a healthier citizen culture, avoid the contamination of rivers and creeks, and avoid the use of plastic bags, because she also designed a whole kit that is special for the collection of the feces of dogs and pets. And also she's helping to capture more than 2,200 kilograms of CO2. They're aiming at all these objectives of sustainable development, given the fact that it's a business model. Thanks to the B Impact Assessment, we identified that it's generating at an environment level, generating high impact at these challenges, but also through contracting vulnerable communities like their workers. It also allows to contribute to decent work and economic growth, or even to sustainable citizen communities, because these services that they offer are being taken to all of the family homes and family units that we find in the country. So these are just 2 examples of what B companies do. Later on, we will have a very important guest that will tell you even more. It's also a B certified company, but I wanted to bring you the concept of the impact business model and what you can get to know through these tools and checked within your organizations. Also from B system, what we look for is to work from and for interdependency to look together for the success in economy. So for that, we created an innovation line, which are projects. Projects as vehicles of collective impact, which means to use the strength, innovation, knowledge of all the B Corps and other stakeholders so that together they can provide solution to different social and environmental challenges that are found in the territories. Today, I would like to show you one of our projects that is very much focused in the environmental area as well. It's called the Connected Project. I'm going to share the video so that you can see a lot more about what it is. And also, you're welcome to participate if you wish. Something that seems so everyday, like opening faucet and drinking water, is almost impossible for millions of people in the country and the world. Inequality in access to water solutions, sanity, and hygiene increases the vulnerability of communities and puts at risk the lives of people. Even though 32% of municipalities in Colombia do not have access to drinkable water, that is quality water. Whereas throughout the world, almost half of the population does not have services of these type, and almost 2 million people die every year because of diseases derived from the consumption of non-treated water. This reality becomes even more challenging when the initiatives that try to provide solution to a problem require to be managed in a collective manner to guarantee their maintenance and for them to be permanent throughout time. What would happen if millions of companies would be connected to the purpose of providing solution to this challenge? That's how the Connected project is born. An innovative project that seeks to use the strength of the market to make sure that these type of water, health, and hygiene solutions have a better purpose, are sustainable throughout time, and can reach more people. The Swiss Agency for Development and Cooperation, COSUD, and B system joined forces to make possible the Connecta project, an initiative that will be carried out in Caloto and Cajivio, Cauca, two rural areas of Colombia. The Connecta project has the purpose of connecting and leveraging the connections between entrepreneurs and producers with different and big actors of the market so that they can dynamize the communities and destined resources toward a better management of the water, sanity, and hygiene solutions in the rural territories. The Connected project seeks to become a sustainable management project that can be replicated in other entities, communities, regions, and countries as a solution to the problems themselves. We believe that innovations promoted by the market can implement and broaden solutions in our region. We are looking for companies with the same conviction who want to connect to this initiative, to be innovative, and to add value to the Colombian communities. We invite you to be part, because together we can rewrite the paths towards the future. If you would like to know more, visit us at www.proyectoconecta.org. One second. Perfect. So as we can see, this is one of the examples of how, as a movement, we try to, companies, you as entrepreneurs, as business people, when you find those impact business models, that strength that you find within what you do, within your expertise, you can help so that it's not just through philanthropic strategies that we can provide solution to all those challenges that we find normally in vulnerable communities or in our day-to-day, but that they can really be used from all the different areas of your organization. That's why we definitely believe that redefining the success sense in businesses is fundamental to have the best companies for the world and not in the world. Thank you very much. I hope that it was very clear, the information that I provided. Any additional questions? Here you have the contact information from B System. You can go into our website, and there you can also find valuable information for you as business people. Elizabeth, thank you very much for being here with us today. We have several questions from the audience, so let's start. The first would be, are there B companies in the agro sector? B Corps? Yes, of course. We have several B Corps in the agro sector that are doing several interesting innovations, like for example, ProAndes. It is a company that works in the field, and they're doing interesting innovations with foods that are dehydrated, and well, other very interesting projects that I can also share the information with all the audience if you wish. Perfect. Let's go on with more questions. How can I access the impact assessment? Is there any specific requirement? No, there isn't any specific requirement. The only thing is that you have all the intention of responding to the evaluation, that you're very diligent and organized in the process of answering them. As I repeated in the presentation, it's completely free. If you like, we can share the access link so that you can enter. And there you just register, you do the process, and you start answering the evaluation. Thank you so much. For which types of companies is it interesting to achieve a certification as a B Corp? Beyond being a particular interest, what we really look for with the certification, and this is a question that we always get, which is like, what are the benefits if I become a B Corp? Beyond having access to a global network, it is definitely a matter of being part of a change that is extremely necessary in the world. A change that what it looks for is that the companies, as I said before, are not the best companies in the world, but the best companies for the world. A change that allows not just you, not just as an organization, to see the great impact that is being done in terms of the business model, but that also is aligned with the world changes that are coming on. So the consumer is a consumer that has changed undoubtedly, and that looks for other options that are different in terms of products and services, and that are demanding from companies to change their dynamics. And that causes that these type of changes, the movement is extremely interesting, not just for a specific interest or benefit, but because it's really a change that is necessary, that the world is screaming out for. So beyond being a B Corp or not, we invite you to measure your environmental impacts and contribute to these very important changes that are happening. Thank you so much for this information. We have more questions from the audience. What are the benefits of being a B Corp? Well, B Corps have a lot of benefits. One of them is to belong to all of that global network that I was explaining to you about. B Corps, they work amongst themselves, they do projects together, they allow to establish other dynamics in economy. And other than this, it allows you as business people to show the real social and environmental impacts that exist as an organization. It allows you to belong just not to these changes, but also to have better human talent, because the dynamics of employees have changed. It is estimated that for 2025, there is a population that is very interesting. Young people who do not want to work under the same conditions that have been established in the traditional model, but that they are really connected to social and environmental initiatives from their jobs. That allows them to access projects as vehicles of collective impact, and it allows them to be in a measurement of triple impact. The B stamp is very recognized at a world level, and it allows to have import and export processes, easier commercial relationships because of this recognition that as a B business person you have. But beyond all the benefits that might be found for a company, it's really a matter of feeling that change is really necessary, that there is a higher purpose, and why not apply it. Thank you, Elizabeth, for being with us, answering all these questions that we're getting from the audience. We have room for one more. which is there any support for companies in Latin America in the process to be certified as a B company? Yes. In fact, not just in Latin America, but in the world, when you begin the process, you have the support from us as a team, and each team at a national level provides support to the certification process of the company. But I also take advantage of this opportunity to tell you about another benefit that as business people you might have that not necessarily has to do with the B company. We promoted the law of collective interest society benefit, BIC. You can access for free in Colombia, in Ecuador, Peru. It's been approved in all these countries. Colombia is the third country in the world that got this approval, pioneer in Latin America in this process. And it's like that first step to change that purpose, that impact business model, and to start worrying about the measurement and environmental and social aspects. So to be a B company, of course, it's a matter of answering the evaluation. Obviously, we will be glad to support that process. When you begin that certification process, it's completely free. And if it's a company that would like to start differently without being a B company, because here I want to be very honest, to be a B company is difficult. We require a minimum score of 80 points. That's the minimum. And we're talking about that the median in Colombia is 65 points. So that makes it difficult to access the score, but you can start through the big societies. It has very interesting benefits from public purchasing and other benefits that the national government is providing, not just in Colombia, but in the countries that I mentioned before. So yeah, you can find this information and also access all these benefits. We thank Elizabeth for the intervention and all the answers to all the questions that you asked today. Thank you so much. Have a good day.
Recibimos a Giancarlo Giretti con su conferencia.
We want to receive Giancarlo Giretti with his talk, Caravella Coffee, Increasing Impact with the Sustainable Development Initiative. Giancarlo was the founder of Caravella Coffee, and in the last 20 years, he has played many roles in Caravella: quality control, salesman, logistics, exports, human resources, legal, and finances, among others. Currently, Giancarlo is the CFO and CEO at the company, as well as an executive member in its board of directors. His current role implies supervising key teams, leading the financial structuring and the restructuring in the company, as well as its governance and organizational structure. He studied economy at the Universidad de los Andes in Bogotá. Giancarlo, welcome to the Connect Agro series. Thank you so much for the invitation again. First, I'm going to tell you what's Caravella, what it's all about. Okay, now, what do? We work with high quality coffee. We work directly with over 4,500 producers in different parts of Latin America, and our model is based on 5 key principles: transparency, traceability, education, long-standing relationships, and sustainability. So we work with the producer. We help him to improve the quality of their coffee through some very important educational projects. So we do this follow-up with them. Then the producer gives us the coffee. We do some quality analysis, and depending on the quality, we assign a price to it that can be higher or lower depending on the quality. So in summary, it's a pretty simple equation, and we could say that the quality pays. So the higher the quality, the higher price for the producer. And as I was telling you, this is a very simple model that we have. Our company was founded in the year 2000. So we have been 21 years in this adventure, obviously growing, with the purpose of commoditizing coffee. So we can recognize the producer, give him a personal recognition, and then ensuring that he gets a price that really justifies all the work that they are doing. So we work in 7 countries in Latin America: Mexico, Guatemala, El Salvador, Nicaragua, Colombia, Ecuador, and Peru. And in each of these countries, we have an infrastructure, we have a local price, we have over 40 purchase points in the 7 countries, and we work with over 4,500 small coffee producers that deliver the coffee directly to us. So we work exclusively in Latin America and in these 7 countries that I was telling you about. Additionally, we also have an import structure. So we take the price from the farm through us to the roasters, to the end consumer. What do the roasters do? Well, they purchase the coffee that we sell to them, and they turn it into coffee 1-pound packages, and in drinks that will be drunk. So where do we are? Where are we? In the United Kingdom, in North America, in the United States, in Taiwan, and in Australia. And in each of these countries, we have an import office, and we work directly with India, with over 500 roasters of every size, from gigantic industrial roasting operations to the guy that is just roasting in his house garage. So we tell them where the coffee comes from, and we are looking for long-standing relations between the producers that we work with in Latin America and the people that are representing this coffee. So that's an overview, a bird's eye view of what Caravella is doing and where we are. As far as our B Corp certification, we were certified in 2014. And I could say that as far as impact and the triple bottom line, well, that's part of our DNA. Our company was founded with the idea that to have a sustainable model where the producer is the one that wins. Well, it is a win-win situation. So in 2014, we we went for it. We did a self-assessment that Elizabeth was telling us a minute ago. And since then, we have been certified, and we have been lucky that we were recognized by the organization as one of those companies that are best for the world. And we have received this recognition, and we have been recognized as one of the companies to inspire Britain in 2019 by the LSE. And now I'm going to tell you about our journey environmentally and regarding our commitment with carbon neutrality, net zero. So as I was telling you, in 2014, we were certified as a B Corp. Something that happened at that time, and that's important, I don't know if Elizabeth mentioned this, is that filling in the form and receiving the results helps you to grow as a company. One of the things that we learn with doing this, is that we have a business model that is focused on the community, on our workers, to alleviating poverty, but we had some lacks from the environmental point of view. Those are things that usually you don't question in Latin America because it's not part of what is central, what is core to many organizations. So then we started thinking, where are we going? What can we do? Aside from recycling the paper that we use in our offices, and to be more careful with the use of water and electricity, etc. But in 2017, we took the initiative to start measuring our carbon footprint. I believe that all companies should start doing sometime in their history. So we started in 2017. And at that time, it was not a verified measuring. It was scope 1 and 2. And we had a measuring of about 550 tons of CO2 that we were producing. Aside from doing this measuring, we bought those carbon credits. We have been working with different organizations to purchase these carbon credits with different projects that ideally are in our areas of influence. So we are not buying carbon credits coming from Indonesia or China, but we really want to support projects of reforestation or agroforestry projects in the areas where we're working. So in Colombia, in Peru, we have supported some projects in Peru. In 2018, we again went through the process of measuring, and we reached a higher figure, 660 tons. And in this period, we again identified some opportunities for improvement. One of them, for instance, we established a solar plant in Colombia. So about 30 or 35% or 40% of the use of electricity in this plant today is solar energy. So this has helped us to lower our carbon footprint and to have an important commitment regarding clean energy. Regarding employee commuting, we have started initiatives so people use bicycles. We have financed, for instance, for electrical bicycles or electrical scooters or hybrid vehicles. Local impact in the coffee world, we use a packaging bags that are used within the traditional packaging. You usually, probably you have seen pictures of that, and these bags help to keep the humidity, the moisture of the coffee inside. Previously, we would buy these bags from a provider, a supplier in the Philippines or in India. Now we are buying them locally in Latin America, in Colombia. So this reduces substantially our carbon footprint, since we have more local products. And we have worked very closely to improve education and the recognition of our employees regarding this, the awareness of our employees, because if they know more, they will make decisions that will be geared toward protecting the environment. So in 2019, we made one step forward in measuring our footprint. First of all, we included scope 3 that has to do with the production of our suppliers. In other words, the coffee production in the farms. And you can see the figure went up. It was more than three times the previous figure. It went from 600 to over 2,000 tons. So we discovered that in the coffee production, the coffee production represents a very important part in the amount of CO2, especially because of fertilizers that get volatilized in the environment, and their use creates an important impact in the CO2 production. But the technology that we used in 2019 had some lags, and that's that the information that we have regarding the farm where the coffee is produced was taken into consideration large-scale agro-industrial production, like for instance, coffee plantations in Brazil, where you're talking about 500, 1,000, 5,000 hectares, where you have irrigation systems, and that's not the reality of the producers that we work with. Our producers usually are families, they live in their farms, they have an extensions that may be about 3 hectares as an average in those 7 countries that we work with. So the work conditions are totally different to what we were studying with carbon neutral. So we decided to make a change and doing that carbon measurement directly with the producers, because the practices and the irrigation, the production practices can be very different in a 2,000 hectares farm or in a 5 hectare farm. So in 2020, we partner with One Carbon World to measure, verify, and offset our footprint, again, with scope 1, 2, and 3, and we had a figure of 1,600 tons. And additionally, we had a partnership with Solidarity, which is an environmental organization to have a pilot and measure our carbon footprint in individual farms, the farms that we really work with. So starting in 2020, we can say that we are the first, the green coffee company that has been verified as carbon neutral. And what are we doing now? In 2021, as I am telling you, and we have already doing measurements in real farms of the carbon footprint, and we have discovered incredible things that go from what is produced in carbon because of fertilization in Huila to determining, for instance, that there are certain areas in Latin America where coffee production is carbon positive. Instead, there is more sequestration than carbon generation. And this happens because of the vegetation, because of organic production and other things. So this kind of measuring that we are doing has given us a lot of information and has helped us to work with the producers so that they will understand what the story is all about, because I believe that there is a lot of ignorance regarding what does it mean to be carbon neutral and what does that come from. And as they say popularly, what do you do with that? So we have been working with the communities and producers to teach them what this carbon production or non-carbon production is all about, how we can improve our practices in the different farms, how we can reduce or be more efficient in using chemical fertilizers, and how we can make a better use of water, because that's a very valuable resource that we need to protect. So we have partnered with Cool Farm Alliance to do this measuring farm by farm. And one of the nice things that we have been doing this year is that in the coffee packaging that we export from each of our countries, in each of them, we are printing the carbon footprint. So the person that receives that coffee package knows that the coffee that they're purchasing has maybe 100 grams or 1 kilo carbon footprint or whatever. In this way, we are trying to improve the awareness that there might be in the whole supply chain regarding this topic, which is very important for us. Additionally, our goal is to achieve carbon neutrality by 2025. And this is based on having real information from our suppliers. It will not be an estimate, but at least a 75% of real data from our suppliers that will allow us to say, yes, we have achieved carbon neutrality. To this end, both us and our customers, we are learning constantly, we are investing, and we are making sure that, first of all, we are having a business model that is really sustainable, not just from the economical point of view and financial point of view, but also from the environmental point of view. Additionally, we have established a website called greener.caravela.coffee. So you can check it, and there is much more information than what I'm telling you right now. There are many more details, and you will be able to observe what we are really doing. And we are going to continue updating it as we continue learning and getting more information regarding this topic, because we believe that the more people join these initiatives and the more we understand and know about this topic, we'll be able to do more. So please visit this website so that we can have better initiatives. And that's all that I wanted to tell you. Thank you very much. And if you have any questions, I am here to answer them. Giancarlo, thank you so much for accepting our invitation and for being with us this morning. We have several questions from the audience. We're going to get started with the first one. Is there any requirement that Caravela imposes on producers so that you can purchase their coffee? There is no requirement as such. The producer just comes to our purchasing spots with a sample. We analyze the coffee, and if it meets our quality standards, then we immediately proceed to purchase it. Okay, more questions. How do you handle the process to adapt to the different trends and preferences regarding coffee in the countries that you export to? Well, that's a complex question, because I'd say that in general, let's go back. Okay, coffee is a fruit. And as human beings, we like sweet things. We want things that are pleasant. And I believe that that's universal. So internally, we define quality as it has the objective part and the subjective part. The objective part is the lack of defects. The coffee shouldn't have any flavor that is not pleasant. So coffee needs to meet these requirements, but then there is the subjective part. Well, and what is it that I like, or what is it that other people might like? So it's very hard to come to the conclusion that there will be a coffee that everybody will like. But what we can ensure is that the coffee in the areas that we work with, usually they are Arabic coffee and high quality, they have a high level of acceptance. So the subjective quality, we are also meeting that expectation. Thank you so much. Let's go on to the next question. How do you measure the carbon footprint? What is the methodology that you use at the farms? That's a good question. As I was telling you, we have a tool that is already established. It comes from the Cool Farm Alliance. And through this tool, it works in a tablet or in a cell phone. and the farms, and you do the measuring in the farms. What do you take into consideration? The inputs, what are you using, what the suppliers are using, those coffee growers, what are the environmental conditions in each of the farms? Very well. We have more questions from the audience. What practices can be implemented in the coffee farms to reduce the carbon footprint? Initially, you would think that the first thing that you can do is very closely analyze what's our use of fertilizers. We've seen that sometimes people fertilize without doing a soil analysis. So this leads to doing a fertilization that sometimes is lost. Sometimes we are fertilizing more than we should, or maybe with products that not necessarily is what our soil is needing. So the first proposal would be, let's do soil analysis and fertilize according to what our soil really needs for the production. Number two is water use. I know that it might sound weird to talk about water when we're talking about carbon, but we have that water sources, and the production of wash coffee leads to a contamination of water sources. To improve our water source and our water management will help our practices to be more environmentally safe. So those are two things that are not very expensive. Very well. We have more questions. When you work with small producers, how do you overcome the challenges as far as capacity and investment of these producers to reduce the carbon footprint in their crops? What we have done generally, we have always consider that our suppliers are partners. The idea is not to give anything away. They themselves need to understand the importance of these issues, and they need to understand that this provides a benefit to them. So going back to the topic of what are the steps, relatively simple steps that producers can take. So the use of fertilizers, soil analysis. Many times we have done partnerships or agreements with cooperatives or groups of producers and saying, yes, we can finance that so that you can have the necessary soil analysis and really understand what are the chemical products that your soil requires. So we can do that relatively easily. An important topic, which is a bit like the elephant in the room, is the fact that producers, through forest management, they can be able to sell carbon credits. So we are studying this topic. We already know about some initiatives regarding this. And soon we're going to start some pilot projects regarding this, because it could be an interesting source of revenue for producers that will allow them to leverage these for investments directly in the farms. Thank you very much. And now for the last question from the audience, what would be the next step to differentiate coffee from producers and be perceived in a more favorable way in the market? Well, it would be that the next step is to continue doing what we have been doing, which is to have direct contact with the producers so that they can have access to the market. Regarding differentiation, each product, for instance, in the case of Colombia specifically, in Colombia, we say that there is 500,000 producers. So that could show that you could have 500,000 different coffees. What does the producer have to do to achieve this differentiation? Well, improve the processes to learn why he does things in a particular way and not in another way. well, why do I do a 14-hour fermentation and not 50-hour fermentation? But aside from that, you need we need to try to get out of the market where everything is a commodity, everything is the same, as a homogeneous project like oil. In oil, everything is oil. There is not a differentiation between a barrel that was produced in Louisiana or one that was done in the eastern part of Colombia. But with coffee, that's not the case. So this is what we need to look for. Abandon the definition of commodities so that the coffee produced by Mr. Pedro Perez will be different from the one produced by Jose Antonio Martinez. And that's the idea, looking for that differentiation. Very well, Giancarlo. It looks like the audience is really enthusiastic about the topic because we have more questions. Well, that's what we are here for. So let's continue. Do you have an indicator to correlate the carbon footprint with the conservation of ecosystems when you have those crops? Well, that's an excellent idea. The first thing that should be done to achieve that is to understand what's the real carbon footprint in each of these areas. And that's the process that, as I'm telling you, that's what we are doing right now. So the idea to have an indicator to correlate the carbon creation in a municipality, for instance, by hectare or by bag is so many kilos of carbon, considering the environmental conditions. Let's say, for instance, the management of water sources or reforestation, or in the specific case that there is, and if there is no reforestation, through this, you can recognize, well, in what areas the community is doing the proper management or a better management of the resources. And I believe that we can get to that point, but we are not there yet. Thank you for your answer. Next question. What's the life cycle of the bag in which you package coffee, and what would be the possibility that there will be a fungus created during the transportation and storage? Well, those are two important issues. Okay, coffee generally, as part of our standard, is that it will have a moisture content of 11%. That moisture means that there is not activity, fungal activity, which is the other thing that we measure. So to have fungus appear, we need to have a much higher moisture and a much higher water activity. So historically, coffee has been exported in jute bags or fique bags in Colombia. So it's a dry product and it's quite stable. It has a shelf life of 6 to 12 months if the drying process was done correctly. That's key. The drying process needs to be done correctly. If the coffee is dried enough, I can put it in the bag. I can put it inside the bag. It's not a vacuum package, and this avoids that there will be a movement or a transfer of moisture from the outside to the coffee. The coffee as a product has a particularity, and that is that it receives or it delivers moisture. So that's why coffee, it should not be stored like people do it traditionally, that they keep roasted coffee in the fridge, and then it ends up having a flavor to vegetables. So we need to make sure through the quality controls that the coffee has been well dried, that the process was performed correctly, that is within the standards of moisture and water activity. And when it's stable, then it's packaged in this sealed bag that avoid that there will be things from the outside that will go inside. And then we are protecting the quality of the coffee and we are extending its shelf life. Very well, thank you very much. You have told us regarding this quality standard, but there is a very specific question. What would be the most important quality standard? Can you please tell us about each one of them? As I was telling you, the first thing that we check is the moisture content. And generally, there are some established standards in the market, usually between 10 and 12%. As I'm telling you, usually we go for 11%. That's a sweet spot that we know. We also measure the water activity, and it helps us to understand how the drying process was done. And the next thing, again, that's an industry standard. We are not inventing anything, any quality standard that is not used in a standard way in the coffee industry. We measure the yield. Out of these kilos of coffee pergamino, how many exportable kilos of coffee? We see the size of the grain, that it won't have any physical defects. And the next thing we do is that we roast. We roast from each of the batches that we receive from each of the producers. So throughout the year, we test between 20 and 30,000 coffee samples from the producers. So we have an army of people that just do this quality test. So when we roast coffee, we taste it, and it's similar to what that is done. We prepare the beverage, basically, and then there are people that are specifically trained to taste that drink, and we see if it meets the quality requirements or not. That's a subjective quality. The absence of unpleasant flavors, and well, that's the objective one, and then the subjective one, well, I like it. So we have this coffee analysts, and these people know how to calibrate their palate with the palate of our customers. And then, okay, since they meet the quality, the objective standards, do they meet also the subjective standards of our customers? That's what they do. Okay, now, Giancarlo, thank you so much for accepting our invitation and for all these answers to the questions from the audience. Well, I hope that I wish you a lot of success with the next talks. So, thus, we finish our second day of the Connect Agro series, Click Technology and Smart Agriculture Edition, UK LAT-C, an event that strives to prove how through innovation, technology, and the UK experience, we contribute to the transition towards a resilient and climate-smart agriculture. We'd like to thank all the speakers and all the participants that made possible this event, and for sure, to the UK embassies in Latin America and the Caribbean to want to build a better sector. We can meet again tomorrow at 8 in the morning, Colombian time, with a program focused on strategy to decarbonize agro-industrial projects and the logistical chain. Have